From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
A major lawsuit against Rhode Island's biggest company, CVS. The U.S. Department of Justice accuses the pharmacy giant of knowingly and unlawfully filling prescriptions that fueled the opioid crisis. CVS says it's a, quote, false narrative. Plus, a new presidential administration will almost certainly mean a new top federal prosecutor in Rhode Island and in states across the country. What to expect with our guest, Rhode Island U.S. Attorney Zachary Cunha. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nisi is off this week. I'm joined by Eli Sherman from the Target 12 investigators and our guest, U.S. Attorney from Rhode Island, Zachary Cunha. Welcome back to the program. It's good to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, U.S. Attorney, we have so much to talk about. But I do want to begin with the cyber attack. Deloitte, the state's vendor for the social services benefit computer system known as RI Bridges, was hacked. We should note this is a really fluid situation. We're talking on a Friday morning. By the time people see the show, hundreds of thousands of people's personal information could be on the dark web. We just don't know. But I'm curious if your office is involved in this crisis in any form.
Well, I think we are regularly involved in a lot of these cases involving data breaches and incursions. We recently announced a case involving the town of Bristol. Mm-hmm. There are unfortunately a regrettably large number of cyber attacks that go on out there. I'm not going to comment on any ongoing specific investigation. I will say the FBI has specialized resources that they devote to these kinds of cases, that they deploy all around the country when these kinds of things happen to try and identify who the actors are. What happens with that ultimately depends on where the facts go.
Yeah, well, and let's be real about this and frank. I mean, so as you point out, FBI is the investigative arm. Your office prosecutes cases. The chances that the bad guys in this case are caught and held accountable are close to zero, aren't they?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on a particular case. What I will tell you is in the past, we often see that the actors are abroad. They're difficult to identify. They're impossible to reach as far as law enforcement is concerned. When we can, we absolutely reach and prosecute those cases, but there are significant logistical challenges. You're absolutely right.
To your knowledge, has your office ever actually filed criminal offenses against a cyber criminal who's from outside of the country?
Well, the department certainly has, and I believe that my office has as well. And there are instances where when we can identify a particular person and seek their extradition from a country that's cooperative, we will do that. But again, that very much depends on the individual facts of the case.
All right, your office has been very busy, particularly in the past week, and so the timing of you on the show is excellent. So let's start with CVS. Significant federal lawsuit against the pharmacy giant filed this week. The Department of Justice alleges CVS put profits over public safety by unlawfully filling prescriptions that fueled the opioid epidemic from 2013 to today. We have a full breakdown of the story in the Target 12 section at WPRI.com. We should note that CVS strongly denies the claims in the lawsuit. Okay, quick question here, and just sort of a procedural one. There was a lot of involvement with Washington here, Department of Justice in your office. This case could have been filed anywhere. There are CVS pharmacies from coast to coast. Is it because CVS is headquartered in Woonsocket that the jurisdiction was Rhode Island?
Well, we absolutely have venue and jurisdiction here. We also have two members of my staff who are superlative federal prosecutors who are playing a leading role on this case, right alongside the components down in Washington and 3 other U.S. attorneys' offices. But it makes eminent sense for a lot of reasons for the case to be here.
All right. The Justice Department, when they went after Purdue Pharma for its role in the opioid epidemic, went after them criminally. It was a criminal case. This is a civil case. Why didn't you go after CVS criminally?
We follow the facts in the law, and we think that in this instance, the civil remedies under the Controlled Substances Act and the civil remedies under the False Claims Act are the right remedy. If the facts in the law support a criminal case, we bring those cases in plenty of other instances. I don't think I need to tell you that the opioid crisis, which is ongoing, has many different causes, and we've gone after that in as many ways as we have tools. We've brought criminal cases against individuals, we've brought civil cases against corporations, we've brought cases against recovery institutions that are defrauding patients who are trying to recover. And we're out there in the community doing education. So this is a multifaceted problem, and we're putting every tool that we have to deploy against it.
So CVS called this, your lawsuit, a false narrative, and they argued that the claims that are outlined in the lawsuit have already really been litigated on the state side with the state's attorney generals. And so I guess to their point, is your lawsuit redundant here?
Oh, I disagree with that narrative. I think anyone who wants to review the narrative ought to review the complaint. It's 97 pages long. It's incredibly detailed. It lays out, often in the words of CVS's own employees, of what the conduct was going on the ground. There are instances where state pharmacy regulators came to this company and said, your conduct needs to change. There are instances where employees came to the company and said, your conduct needs to change. We're issuing prescriptions we shouldn't be issuing from doctors who are not prescribing them for legitimate medical purposes. I think the complaint speaks for itself, and we look forward to litigating it in court.
Should any other pharmacies be nervous? Walmart, Walgreens?
You know, the department has undertaken a national effort to look at any of these corporations that are responsible for participating in the opioid crisis. And so I think it's fair to say that if the facts and the law support litigation, the department will pursue it.
After the lawsuit dropped, Helena Foulkes, who was the head of CVS Pharmacy from 2014 to 2018, within this period that you looked at, she's also ran for governor this last time around and has expressed interest in running this next time in 2026. She said that she led a team that, quote, confronted this crisis head on. As part of your findings, did you find any evidence that CVS met this crisis head on?
Well, our complaint is about corporate conduct. It does not allege, and it's not about the actions of any particular individual. It's about what the corporation did. And it covers a decade-long period, which involved a number of actors. And that's really all I can say about that.
But did the company, the defendant in this case, did they meet this crisis head on, according to your findings?
Our allegation is that the company failed to meet its legal obligations under the Controlled Substances Act and allowed prescriptions to be filled that led to false claims being filed with the government under the False Claims Act. That's the issue we're going to litigate.
As you point out, this is about corporate conduct and not an individual. That said, as he pointed out, Helena Foulkes played a key role in the pharmacy, the retail side, which is exactly what this is talking about. Do you expect Helena Foulkes will be interviewed or deposed?
I'm not going to comment on what's going to happen in the course of the litigation. I think at the moment we've filed our complaint. This is now going to proceed in federal court, and that's the place where litigation decisions will be determined.
All right, we have about a minute left before we have to go to break. It's a civil suit, as we repeatedly said. If the government prevails before U.S. District Court Judge William Smith, who was assigned to the case, what does that look like?
Well, the way that the law is structured is each and every individual prescription that is dispensed in violation of the Controlled Substances Act, there's a civil penalty for that. That's determined ultimately by the district judge after trial. There's also a recovery to the United States under the False Claims Act of up to 3 times the amount of a claim that's submitted to a federal health care payer. So we're talking about a lot of claims and potentially a lot of dollars, but what that ultimately looks like is going to be determined by the court.
But this would be a civil penalty, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. I mean, ballpark. I know I can't, because you're going to do some discovery. You might find some more evidence as you go through all of this. It's a moving target number, but it's going to be a big figure.
I think it's accurate to say it'll be a big figure. If you look at the complaint, we've attached a couple of examples, which are a non-representative sample. There's going to be a much larger sample when this actually proceeds to litigation, and experts review this data, and we obtain additional data that we don't have yet from the company. But that individual example includes over 10,000 specific instances. So we're talking about a large number here.
All right, when we come back, we're going to discuss Zachary Cunha's future with President Trump 2.0 just around the corner. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Eli Sherman. Our guest this week is Rhode Island U.S. Attorney Zachary Cunha. So, U.S. Attorney this time next month, he will be President Trump once again. And so people at home understand U.S. attorneys are appointed by the president after a recommendation from the state senators. Then they are voted on by the Senate. You were appointed by President Biden. Will you be resigning when the new administration takes over, or even before it?
I will not be resigning before the administration changes. And as far as whether I am asked to resign once that occurs, that's something that has yet to be determined. Historically, it has been the practice that an incoming administration requests the resignation of the U.S. attorneys from the previous administration. That's happened on various timelines, so we'll see.
I want to talk about your potential future, and by doing so, I want to bring up a social media post by current Attorney General Peter Nerona, who of course was U.S. Attorney before. He wrote this on Blue Sky. He was responding to a Dan McGowan column that identified rising Democrats in Rhode Island, and he wrote, "Great shot of the person who could be an exceptional attorney general," and it was a picture of you. Your head's cut off in that picture, but it was a picture of you. Did AG Nerona foreshadow something here? Are you considering a run for attorney general?
Look, that's very flattering. I'm going to figure out what my next chapter looks like after this chapter ends.
That's not a no. So are you open to it?
What I will tell you is I have been deeply privileged to be in public service for almost 25 years now. It has been a joy and a pleasure to get up every day and do that work. And I very much hope that in the future I have the opportunity to continue to be a public service, but what that looks like, when, where, and how, those are all questions for another day.
You noted that you've spent a career in non-elected government roles, and I just wonder, do you have any reservations about taking the leap into politics, which is, frankly, there's a lot more public noise to those roles?
As I say, what I'm focused on right now is doing this job to the best of my ability, to maximizing our office's impact. That's what I was put in this seat to do. That's what I'm going to do right up until the end.
With President-elect Trump poised to take office again, what do you think, from a Department of Justice perspective, we can expect from a second term with President Trump?
Well, it's not for me to predict what the political priorities of a new administration will be. What I will tell you, having served with the department for almost 20 years now, with a lot of truly wonderful, distinguished public servants, and particularly I'm thinking of the folks I work with every day at the U.S. Attorney's Office, is you have people who are tremendously dedicated to the department as an institution, to following the facts and the law. Those are the people who are the backbone of the department, and policies change, charging policies change, areas of emphasis and focus change, but those people continue to do the work day in and day out, and I expect them to continue to do that.
Do you think your office will be involved in more immigration cases?
Again, that's going to depend on the priorities of an incoming administration and on the facts.
Well, it's pretty clear that's a priority of his, wouldn't you say?
I would, but whether that impacts Rhode Island and how it impacts Rhode Island, those are all things that remain to be seen.
It's no secret that Trump, a Republican, has been critical of the DOJ, but we also saw President Biden, a Democrat, sort of take aim at the justice system when he pardoned his son, Hunter Biden. And I just wonder if you think that whether the justice system has become too influenced by politics.
I'm not going to comment on what external actors have said about the justice system. All I can tell you is that my experience, particularly in this office and throughout my tenure with DOJ, is that you have dedicated career folks who are doing exactly what they ought to be doing. They're not motivated by politics. They're motivated by doing the right thing, getting the just result, and following the facts and the law.
I want to clear up my notebook here. There was a disturbing case out of North Providence in February where a predominantly black church was set ablaze. Your office charged a Kevin Colantonio with arson. Yes. Where does that case stand?
That case actually stands in a posture where just this morning we have filed with the U.S. District Court a plea agreement. We have reached a proposed resolution in that case in which Mr. Colantonio will plead to intimidation based on race or religion. He will plead to arson, and he will plead to 2 counts of assaulting a federal officer. That is a resolution that we have discussed at length with the victims. It provides for a 5-year mandatory minimum prison sentence, although Mr. Colantonio's ultimate sentence will be determined by a federal judge. And I'm tremendously pleased that we are approaching closure in what is an important case and part of our civil rights enforcement efforts, which are critical.
As you point out, 5-year mandatory minimum. Yep. When your prosecutors write your sentencing memorandum, are you going to be asking for more? Do you know yet?
Well, that's partly a determination based on the federal sentencing guidelines, which have yet to be determined by the Office of Probation. That's partly determined by ultimately the facts and circumstances of the case and weigh in from the victims. But as I say, that's the floor.
Okay.
Let's talk about Bradley Hospital and DCYF. Your office reached an agreement with DCYF this week over an issue that you actually investigated 6 months ago, showing that children with behavioral health issues were getting warehoused at Bradley Hospital in East Providence, which is a psychiatric hospital, for very long periods of time, sometimes more than a year. You said something when you announced the consent decree that this isn't a victory lap. Can you lay out exactly what needs to come next from the state?
So there are multiple things. The consent decree provides a variety of procedures that the state is going to implement in terms of making sure that this care is available to kids when they are in crisis. Again, the issue is not about Bradley. It's not about whether there are individuals who are in crisis who need to be hospitalized. It's about what happens afterwards. When the hospitalization gets the kids stable, they should be going back to their home or going back out into the community. This consent decree puts in place procedures for the state to do that. It puts in place benchmarks by which the state will be measured and that will be publicly available and reviewable. And it puts in place a monitor who's going to be able to advise the federal district court about whether this is happening.
So what, we have about a minute left here, Attorney. If the state fails to meet those benchmarks, and I think this is before Judge McConnell, right?
It is.
Okay, so that would mean the state's in contempt of court.
Yes.
In 1 minute, what would that look like?
Well, it would look like a variety of things depending on what the state does, and I'll start by saying I hope that never occurs.
Sure,
I hope the state complies and we get these kids the care that they need. But the judge has a wide variety of remedies at his disposal, and that would depend on what the monitor sees going on the ground, what they think needs to be fixed, whether the state's ordered to comply with a particular provision by a particular date, or there are monetary penalties. Those are all things the judge would determine.
Okay, and do you know where that stands? Has a hearing been set or anything before Judge McConnell? And
filed yesterday. Hearing has not yet been set.
Okay. U.S. Attorney Zachary Cunha, thanks so much for joining us on the program. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you.
You're my final guest of 2024, so congratulations, I guess.
I am honored, and Merry Christmas, and thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you. And when we come back, Governor Dan McKee was a guest on 12 News at 4. His outlook for 2025 in Rhode Island. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. You're Al Viti and House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Also joining Kim Kalunium live was Governor Dan McKee. After discussing the ever-fluid cyber attack, Kim tackled other major news affecting the state, starting with the long-delayed pallet shelter in Providence.
I want to talk to you about some other issues while we're here. It's winter, and the long-delayed pallet shelters in Providence still haven't opened. Former Congressman David Cicilline said just last week in a meeting, quote, "The idea that this has not happened yet and we still don't have a proposal from anybody in state government charged with facilitating this kind of project is alarming." Is it time for you to issue an executive order to get these pallet shelters open?
Well, I think that, first of all, we're accommodating the House of Hope. They have this idea that pallet shelters would be good transitioning. We're going to try to make that work. The timing on this thing just reflects the fact that there's building protocols, building permits, there's fire codes. You can't shortcut that. So
should you have changed it, though? Should you have stepped in to try and facilitate a change in the law or a change in the code for this?
No, because anybody who are housing, whether it's in your home or in a pallet shelter, the safety factor is the top priority. So should we be taking a look at, and I've always said that we should be looking at the process in terms of what we're dealing with, but in this case, you need to follow the regulations that are in place, and you're not going to short circuit that and then put anybody at risk based on fire codes, the fire marshals, the building officials. That's something as a mayor I always knew that you should not be directing people to do something that is that they feel as though it would not be safe.
Today in the Boston Globe and Roadmap, they reported today that it appears Hasbro is unlikely to stay in Rhode Island. The last time you were here, you said you were working to schedule another meeting with the CEO of Hasbro. Has that happened? What was that conversation like?
Well, we've provided a presentation of different options, and then we're still in conversations with Hasbro. So I'm not agreeing with that the decision has been made. In fact, we've been told it hasn't been made yet. So we're in discussions. As long as we're doing that, we feel as though we have a good possibility of keeping Hasbro here and the jobs here, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that the leadership at Hasbro know this is the place that they should be, and bringing universities in the discussion, right? Bringing CEOs, peers of the current CEO, Chris Cox, and that conversation is continuing, Kim.
When's the next time you plan to meet with him?
Well, I think that will be hopefully right after the holidays.
Okay.
Yes.
There have been some reported drone sightings up and down the East Coast. What are you hearing locally, and are you concerned?
Well, you're always concerned when people are concerned, and this is something that certainly is concerning people up the East Coast. So our state police is doing investigations. They're in direct contact with the local police stations. If you happen to see a drone that you're concerned about, my advice would be to call your local police. They will in turn contact state police, and then we will pursue it. If it reaches a level of high security issues, then we'll notify the Fusion Center in Providence to kind of follow through on that.
We've been in touch with the state police, and as of Monday, they told us they haven't gotten any reports of mysterious drone sightings. So is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
Okay, so status quo, no strange drones over Rhode Island. Earlier this month, the court ruled that Rhode Island can return to truck tolling. Any update on if or when those tolls are going to be turned back on?
Well, we're still reviewing the case, and I haven't had an opportunity to meet with the Senate President and the Speaker on it, but when the session opens up, we'll get together and discuss that issue, and we'll see where it leads us. All right,
looking ahead to the new year, your top priority for 2025?
Well, the top priority is, a carryover from last year, which is making sure that the Washington Bridge is moving ahead. We're pleased that we have two contractors that actually have national reputations to do the work. And clearly, at the moment, this issue about the cybersecurity breach is high on the list. But we're going to continue to do the work, as I'm meeting with my cabinet, of making sure our academic outcomes are increasing. Focusing on the Rhode Island 2030 plan. Making sure that we're working on a road to prosperity, have more income for families and personal wealth. And then this year at the State of the State, I'll be talking about health and wellness being a key factor as well. And
we've got just about 15 seconds left. Looking back at 2024, I know this doesn't give you a lot of time, but your biggest triumph, biggest regret?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I would have liked to have known more about the bridge when it was closed and the short notice we had. But I think we've worked our way to a point where we can see the light at the end of the tunnel there. So I think it's a combination of those two, right? That we were able to get it back on track, and yet there was a slow start that we know has caused a lot of frustration for people.
All right, Governor Dan McKee, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm off next week, so this is my final Newsmakers of 2024. I want to take a moment to thank you for watching each and every week. It's an opportunity for us to go beyond the headlines and dive into important topics. And without your viewership, we simply would not be here. I also want to thank the people you do not see, including our producer Jackie Gummersall and director Alex Kohler. They do a great job not only keeping Ted and I on track, which is no easy task. They make the show better each and every week. To all of you, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2025.